and there was a lot of clean-cut shows out there, especially in the UK. Like, it was very much, let's be all nice about things, and our approach was a bit more, well, disability isn't always nice. Losing your sight sucks, but everyone's like, let's be supportive and have a hug, and we're like, well, no, what practical things can you do? Can we just talk about the fact that this sucks and the mental health implications without sugarcoating it?
Yo, what's up? Welcome back to the See-Through Podcast, a podcast where I have transparent conversations with the disability community. I'm your host, Lance Johnson. Today, I talk with some fellas all the way over in the UK. They have a podcast called the Seesaw Podcast, where they're all about keeping it balanced. And how they keep it balanced is they are not politically correct. They are not afraid to talk about anything. And in this episode, we talk about a few things that may or may not offend you. I'm just giving you a warning. It's a fun episode. It's something a little different. But before you hear my conversation with T and Cleaves from the Seesaw Podcast, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you follow this podcast on social media. The handle is at See-Through Pod. And if you want bonus See-Through Podcast content, make sure to join the See-Through Few over on Patreon. The link is in the show description. This episode's a doozy. Get ready. Here it is. Make sure the hair's looking good, you know?
Yeah, I'll do the same, mate. Yeah, give it a shot.
All right, we'll have T and Cleaves from the Seesaw Podcast. Welcome to the See-Through Podcast.
That's good.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
But yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. I'm excited to talk to you. You guys have a really cool podcast, and you guys are based out of the UK, for those who don't know you. And I don't want to give an intro for you two. So how about you guys do it for me?
Please, you want to do the intro this time?
No.
Okay. Typical. So, I'm T, that's Cleaves. We do a show called the Seesaw Podcast. Been going for 18 months now. 82 episodes up to this point. Released one today.
Once a day.
Well, it won't be the day where this goes out, but the day that we're recording.
I thought you said released once a day.
No, not once a day. See, this is basically the podcast. It's two guys discussing anything and everything to do with disability, blindness, culture, but we do it in a bit of a different way. Taking shots, not cutting corners, like being very sort of
Blunt.
bull in the china shop sort of thing. Just a different approach to the topic of disability, visual impairments. Controversial is a common word used for our show.
Controversial, man. That sounds intense, especially for a podcast in the, about blindness, and disabilities, because it feels like, and we'll talk about that in this episode, it feels like our community is pretty safe. It's pretty, everyone kind of shares similar views, which I also want to talk about that deeper. I don't buy it that everyone thinks the same way. I don't buy it that everyone has these same opinions because, our community is so big and diverse. But like when you say controversial, like what's your hot take of controversy? Like, I guess everyone has a different threshold. Some people, like, it takes very little for them to be offended. And there's some people who it takes a lot, so like, what's your own, where are you at on that meter?
I guess we're on the a lot meter to be offended.
Yeah. Not intentionally.
It's just, we're just happy to jump into a topic at the deep end, or, cliche trials by fire, or just anything really that means that you're going to have to come at it straight on rather than sort of dance around it for a little bit. Some people like to have things done in a more sensitive manner. We're not always that particular viewpoint. We're more of a see an issue, let's grab the ball by the horns. Can I fit any more cliches into that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I've been doing this podcast 2 years, or about the same time you both been doing your podcast, and I've run a pretty clean podcast. You know, I'm not ruffling too many feathers here. At least I don't think that I am. But I think there's an art to that, because I kind of have learned what topics to avoid, or just maybe not avoid, but just, all right, well, yeah, I guess it would be to avoid. And I'm getting kind of to the point now, I'm 2 years in, I've accumulated more knowledge on things. I feel more confident in what I want to talk about and discuss. And I've kind of, my curiosity is pulling me in deep to talk about some of these topics that I've been avoiding to talk about since I've started my podcast. But with that, I know is going to come pushback. And I have been kind of giving myself like pet talks, like, oh man, it's okay. You can just talk about whatever, you know, you want to, be yourself. You know, my podcast is a see-through podcast because, you know, I pride myself on being transparent, and I've always been transparent, but I guess what my point is, I've just avoided certain topics, you know, so you can do both, but I'm kind of ready to jump in and talk about some things that, you know, I've been putting off. And it sounds like you both kind of just dive in, you know, hot mics, you know, and you have received pushback in the past, and that's really something that I haven't really dealt with. I've had a few comments, a few trolls, you know, on my pages, but I feel like that's a good sign of something, you know, when you have trolls. Yeah. So I guess from I want to put it on your side. Any tips for me as a podcaster who's wanting to explore these more, you know, as you said, controversial things? And what kind of pushback have you received?
Yeah, I suppose when we started, we sort of organically went that way because it was grounded in our thoughts on a lot of the topics we approached. And there was a lot of clean-cut shows out there, especially in the UK. Like, it was very much, oh, let's be all nice about things. And our approach was a bit more, well, disability isn't always nice. Losing your sight sucks. But everyone's like, oh, let's be supportive and have a hug. And we're like, well, no, what practical things can you do? Can we just talk about the fact that this sucks and the mental health implications without sugarcoating it? And I suppose when you are starting out in podcasting, you always want to get the most audience you can. And so it's easy to err on that sort of safer side of things, be a bit more mainstream. But we never really did that. I don't think we ever went to a point where we thought, oh, maybe we shouldn't say this because we'll get more people listening. It was, we want to talk about this and we want to talk about it in our blunt way. And we just sort of went for it. And then organically, the listenership came to us. So we might not be the biggest out there, but we have a loyal listenership that care about the issues we're bringing up. So I suppose not really caring about the numbers can really help. Like, it depends how you measure success. Is it engagement, or is it like the amount of people listening? So I think the greater the number, the more you've got to censor yourself. I don't know, Cleaves, you've got a different idea on that.
Well, when we first started, I kind of grew up sort of listening to like punk rock music and things like that, probably from like the age of 12. So it was always sort of inbuilt in me from that sort of age that just antagonize people a little bit and to spark a reaction. And that's what we kind of went in. Even now, sometimes with the podcast, I will deliberately antagonize people for no reason, just to pull that reaction out of people. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing always. Sometimes it is. But it gets people talking. They'll if you annoy someone about it to the point of the threshold where they're screaming at you in the face that they don't like it, at least then you've got their opinion on your table. And it's just their opinion is often kind of different to what yours is, but doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't make us right. It just means people have different opinions, and you don't have to take that to heart. Just because someone doesn't like your opinion, they might come at you as a personal attack rather than focusing on the points that you're making or what you're trying to say. And I would say that the personal attack part is just to not care about that. Just focus literally on the points that you're trying to make and the points that they're trying to make, and pick out the legitimate ones from the ones that are just like I say, just there to attack you as a person or podcaster rather than the topic itself.
It sounds like you have a good relationship with your audience, in the sense that they kind of know what they're getting when they press play on an episode of yours. And they like that honesty, they like that truthfulness, and I think people gravitate towards authenticity. And with my podcast being about transparency, that's why I wanted to talk to you both and about your podcast, because you're taking that different approach. You're kind of diving headfirst in some of these more controversial topics, and it's just kind of fun for me to hear about different approaches to different podcasts. So I guess what I wanted to ask you now is, like, what kind of pushback have you heard, or what kind of pushback have you received?
So it doesn't happen as often as we would imagine it to. With a lot of the topics we cover, it's not all the time. More recently, we approached a topic with changes to the UK benefit system, where a lot of disabled people are going to be essentially worse off financially in some cases, and the focus is going to be more on getting them out into the workforce and actually paying into the system, where as before they've just been sort of getting support from the government. And we took on this subject and used a BBC article, so decent source, and we just broke down the article. We were like, okay, what are the pros of this? What are the cons of this? And we, at the end, erred on the side of, if you've been, like, we have controversial thoughts when it comes to like employment within the disability community. And in the UK, it's like 85% of visually impaired and blind people do not work. And frankly, I'm not going to speak for Cleaves, but I'm pretty sure he agrees from the episode we've done, that's absolute bullshit. They should be working. Like, there's not really any reason that they shouldn't. So our approach was like, maybe this is the kick up the arse that some people who have just been coasting through life need. And then we got the pushback, mainly from the blind community on social media, basically saying that we were insensitive and deplorable and we didn't understand the impact it was going to have. And well, we understand it. We just don't agree with what they thought about it.
A lot with it was the way we tackled it as well. It was in a pretty straightforward manner, wasn't it? It came across as uncaring. I think the word was used quite a lot, but I think the way that we put things can often be misconstrued, because in that particular sense, I genuinely have the belief that the majority of disabled people can work. So it wasn't that I was uncaring towards that. I do genuinely think most people can work. I don't think I don't see why that is such a bad thing to strive towards, but I don't think that was the point that was necessarily got across in the episode. So I guess I understand why some people took it poorly, but we addressed that in a separate episode anyway. We addressed the feedback. It's not like we don't welcome that.
No.
But yeah, we've had pushback on that. It tends to be, a lot of the time, if we do a topic, it's something that we found on Twitter that maybe people are talking about or that is current, and we'll try and put our own spin on that. And it's usually, I would argue, a more positive spin than what people are saying on social media outlets. But I feel it's because, I don't know. I find there's a lot of disabled people that feel a little bit sorry for themselves sometimes, and they sort of gravitate together, and there's this sort of echo chamber, and it can get a bit downtrodden, which is unfortunate. I think there's a bit of a lack of positivity in the space sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there is a lot of negativity. It's kind of ironic in the sense too that there's a lot of negativity on social media in general, but as long as it steers in a positive direction for the disability community, you can be as negative as you want. It can be tweet after tweet of complaints, tweet after tweet after tweet of calling people out. But if you're ever, just like some would even say like by saying that disabled people can work, you're giving the disabled community a lot of credit, like, yeah, like they're fully, capable of going to work, which is what some would interpret that as like a compliment, or having faith in the community that, so, there's different, different strokes for different folks, I guess in terms of, and I think it's good to have differing opinions, like it's good to have, variety of podcasts and, the disability community is so diverse that I think it's good to have different viewpoints thrown out there versus, like you said, that echo chamber. Sometimes I worry that I'm a part of that echo chamber by avoiding topics or, things like that. Do you ever feel like you intentionally have an opinion for the sake of going against the grain?
I mean, sometimes. I'm not going to say that we don't.
I'm going to say that I don't necessarily have the opinion, but I will definitely put it out there, even if it's not my own. I'll happily play devil's advocate to whatever's in the space at the time. Yeah. I just think everything should be explored.
You need balance, and that's essentially what Seesaw is. And like, cringy as it is, one of the things we've been saying about, like, a bit of a tagline we've done recently is keeping it balanced. And that's not us having a balanced discussion on the show. It's, this is what people are pissed off about. Here's the other side of it. Here's the opinion that you don't hear in that echo chamber. And sometimes we agree with it. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's us just going, okay, this isn't our opinion, but other people, we've done a few episodes where it's like, the other argument to this issue is you're all just whinging about something that isn't that big a deal. This is the reason why. There's things you can do yourself to work around this, and sort of like lighting fires and throwing, heat at people for no reason. Like, we will play devil's advocate on occasion. I
think a lot of the things that happen during this sort of echo chamber is they'll have a problem. A lot of people will also go, yeah, that problem affects me also. But then there's no like tangible, positive, there's no one there going, yeah, but this is how you can solve that. That seems more rare. It's more, this is my problem. Oh, I have that problem too. Full stop.
Yeah. And we've tried to approach that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Not a lot of solutions. You try to bring solutions to the table, and sometimes people maybe like you said with the disability approach, in the sense like that's what the government they think they're providing a solution, but people disagree with it. And you're kind of talking about with the disability, maybe it's a good thing, and let's explore that aspect. And then, whereas most of the community is just exploring the negatives, you wanted to explore the positives because you're trying to keep that balance there. And then people can get pissed off because they're like, why are you trying to, and that happens a lot here in the States. It's like, if I entertain any ideas that aren't on the progressive side, then therefore I get linked to the conservative side. It's like there's no gray area anymore. You're either left or right, or, black or white or red or blue. And it's frustrating because I feel like most things in life are in that gray area. And it's like, I want to explore that without fear of, backlash. And, I guess, it's just a sign of I guess it comes with the territory of having a podcast in 2022.
No, definitely.
I don't really mind the backlash. I welcome it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's like I say, it's just separating the personal from the genuine points about the argument you're making.
Yeah, well, we've had that. Especially with some of the feedback we had about the most recent incident. Some of it was right, we addressed it, like Cleaves said, in another episode, and said, okay, these are the points that were raised. Here is our counterpoint to that, just to give food for thought. There's some of them were very much
childish name calling.
Yeah, it was like, oh, these are heinous. They have no compassion. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't do the research. One of the favourite ones that we had was, these people would be ableist if they weren't disabled. I was like, what a stupid statement that is. Like, but the fact is that we are in the disability community, so what a stupid statement. Like, it's not ableist. I'm not even going to get onto ableism as a whole thing. I hate that. But that's another controversial thing that we might bring up down the line.
You said you had an issue with ableism, because that's a word, that's a buzzword right now. And I discovered that word recently. It's a kind of a new word for me that I've learned, and it clicks with me, and I understand it and relate to it. But I'm curious to know what your take is on that.
I hate the word, personally. I don't think we need to have more terms and labels for what is essentially ill treatment of others. We have some historical terms which are grounded in anti-Semitism, race, gender, that sort of thing. But I wasn't on the committee when disabled people decided, we need the equivalent of racism or sexism in the disabled community. It's like, why? Why have you got to invent a label to now use as a flag? Like, I don't see the value of it. And the way it's used is such, like, it's just such broad strokes. And I know there's levels to everything. Like racism, there's levels to it, but we can all look at a situation and go, that's racist, or you can see a side of it where you think, oh, that's racist. But here's an example where ableism is bullshit. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was someone on Twitter, a wheelchair user, went to a hotel and they tweeted about a hairdryer which was plugged in and it was up on a shelf that they couldn't really reach. And they basically said, this is an ableist establishment. I have the right to dry my hair like that. I'm thinking, they're like, oh, well, have you spoken to him about it? Can it not get you another hairdryer? Did you not bring your own? It's like, this isn't ableism. This is just a hairdryer. Like, what are you talking about? But you get that side of it, but then ableism is also used in cases where someone can't access a building or is refused access because of an assistance dog. And okay, fair enough. If there's genuine grounds of prejudice there, but when you're using the same word for both instances, it means absolutely nothing, because you can throw any situation that you're unhappy about and use that word. And I think that's why it's so dangerous, because you run the risk of basically making the whole world super sensitive. And like you said, it's about being like this woke mentality. It goes a little bit too far sometimes. You should be allowed to make mistakes without persecution, because we don't know everything. But we don't want to get to a place where everyone's being so careful about every tiny thing. It'd be a boring life, wouldn't it? Come on. Like, there's no excitement in life if everyone's just like being politically correct and considerate all the time. And we never leave EDI meetings, for Christ's sake.
You know what? That's an interesting point, because I think ableism is real. I think ableism is a thing, but I do agree with you that I think the word is overused, and I think that's maybe what you're saying. But like, I think that, and people have different takes on what ableism is or what that actually means. My definition might be different than someone else's. Like, another word that's overused all the time, here in the States is, everything's racist, everything's sexist, everything is transphobic, everything is, and it's just like, everything can't be that. And sometimes I scratch my head at some scenarios that are called these words, and I'm like, what? I don't necessarily agree. Like the hairdryer thing. Like, I agree with you. That's like, it's a stretch. So could it be that, words like ableism are just overused, or?
I think that is the case. I sort of feel that as well, though, about sometimes I feel that derogatory words, if people use them so much to the point they lose all value, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I'd rather everyone used it 10 times a day deliberately, absolutely anyone, to the point where that word has lost all meaning, than completely avoiding it, because then in a hushed whisper in a back alley conversation, someone's going to say it, and it's at that point it's really bad. But like you say, if you use it for such a large capacity of things that it could possibly mean, then what does that word even mean after a period of time? You're going to be inventing a new word.
We have one word that covers all of this. It's called discrimination. Like, why can't we just have the one word, and you can have a situation which is discriminatory. It's like, okay, why is it? And then you can sort of say, okay, it's discrimination because that individual is black or a woman, or they're gay or trans, or any form of discrimination. We don't need to keep inventing words. Like, we all agree that discrimination is not a good thing. But then when you start getting into the whole creating a term for every single, like, where does it stop? Like, where do we stop with this? Do we now start combining things where, like, example, like, if you have a black woman who's also disabled and trans, do they now need a word that consists of all of the instances where they might be discriminated against, or do they just use discrimination as a blanket term, which we all agree is not a good thing? But why do they need to? Because you could have 4 different labels of an ism that would apply to a situation where they have had a negative experience. And I'm just thinking, do we need any more of these words? Do they need to be thrown around so much? Well, if they are, they need to be thrown around to a point where they are meaningless, like Cleaves just said, and that's fine. But we just need to have that consensus of, we know discrimination's wrong. If that word's used, we know that someone's getting in trouble. There's some legal ramifications about that.
But it's that the words are getting stretched as well, that they're being used for such minor instances where people might have just overstepped the boundary without even realizing it, and there'd be like zero malice or anything like that behind it. It's just that they've said the wrong word without even knowing it. And okay, you tell them, you can't really use that word anymore. It's not generally accepted. And the person probably just be like, oh, right, I didn't know that. Okay, I won't use it again. What's wrong with that? Like, it doesn't have to be this big
social lynching.
Yeah. And that just happened with Lizzo, what you're talking about. You know, she used the word, everyone knows it by this point, and I had no clue that word was offensive. So it's like, and neither did Lizzo. So, but some people reached out to her as if she did it maliciously. Like, that's the word, you guys use, which is a great word to describe it. But it's like, she wasn't being malicious with having that lyric in her song, so it's, don't approach her as if she were being malicious. And it's almost like I want my way. It's like, it almost seems demanding and like a little bit, it can come off a little childish sometimes, of like, you said something that I don't like and I want you to change it. It's like, it's almost like a hissy fit.
Those people that do shout about that a lot, I think, so, for the most part, it's good. It's got to go that way. There's just one or two there that are basically just ranting on social media as their hobby, and they're using that to masquerade as like justice, and it's not the case. The majority of the time, it's all done for the welfare of disabled people, and I'm all about that. It's just the one or two that are on the bandwagon and just like to shout about things. Sure, yeah. It's just not. It's not for me.
Yeah, but you don't have to be a swing door effect. And I think that sometimes does happen. And I've seen on social media where there'll be something that's happened and it'd be all kicking off on Twitter, and statements like, disabled people don't want this. It's like, well, you don't speak for me. I remember this community as well. And I know a lot of people who won't agree with you. But because they're loud, like, is this what the public are seeing? Is this what wider society sees? Do they think that all disabled people are miserable little bastards who just moan about every single thing? And it's like...
Regrettably, yes. We've done whole episodes on how we can change disability image.
Yeah, we have. Because it's an issue. It is. And
so you think that, the loud minority has affected the public image of the disability community?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think you're right with that too. I've never said that, on the podcast, but I think that's true.
It's negative. That's the problem. we want for all of those people who say that they're advocates and that they complain about injustice, and injustice, you've got to highlight that. But the way you do it, you've got to be so careful. And it's so difficult to go through any social media stream and see any disabled person being positive or proactive with something. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen.
Because we did a whole episode on how we disabled people should have a more positive media. The media should have a more positive picture of them in the same way that like LGBTQ communities do. And we should have like disability pride parades and things like that can make like a real positive go of things, as opposed to just always seeing the negatives. Why aren't more people doing to help this, and just shouting about it that way? But instead,
I can't afford my heating because I'm disabled. Oh, I fell down the stairs because I'm disabled. It's like, no, how about like instead of just showing the Paralympians winning gold, how about, I'm married, I've got a career, like I'm doing all right with things, to be honest. Things are pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, where's these instances of showing sort of independence and integration in a positive way, as opposed to all the negative tripe that's out there?
Yeah, I think, and that's the stories that I like to highlight. The guests I bring on is, I always bring guests on who have a cool story, and they're just doing a lot, with their lives, with or without a disability. And it's, and I think that's I try to, I talk about bridging the gap, because I feel like there, we talked about echo chambers, and I think there is a gap between the non-disabled and disabled communities. And when I'm trying to bridge that gap by talking and just sharing cool stories that are cool, regardless of a disability or not, you know what I mean? And so when I can tend to get frustrated when I feel like that those extreme examples on social media or TikTok, that they may be steering the public's perception in the wrong way that I'm trying to steer it, because they're taking the literal opposite approach that I think is effective. And I don't know. It's just I've had to unfollow people. I've had to mute accounts just from constant they're pushing a specific agenda that I just don't agree with. And it's like, if I got online, I think what frustrates me is if I got online and started pushing an agenda that they didn't agree with, they would be so pissed off, and you would never hear the end of it. But they have free reign to just go on and on and on and on and post and post and post and post, because they have that, progressive really opinion that has got the clear by the disability community, so they can just say whatever they want. But on the other side, it's like, if you say whatever you want, if you don't have that clear, that check, because we know what's safe and what's not safe to say. And it's, so whenever you choose to go, why is that? Because you've seen what you can kind of gauge what's safe and what's not safe by just going online, seeing what people are okay with and not okay with. And you may have a differing opinion on one topic, and you'd be like, well, I actually think differently than that. But I saw so-and-so, I saw Johnny posted about that, and he got ripped apart, so I'm just going to avoid that topic. But again, that loud minority they're able to keep being loud because everyone's too afraid to talk about the differing opinion so it's just like, it does feel like I don't know how big of an actual problem it is, but in terms of a podcast, from a podcasting perspective of someone in this community talking to this community about this community, it's just something I've noticed and I've been frustrated with. It's like when people are afraid to talk, it just builds onto that echo chamber again, which keeps those people being loud, which again keeps society's perception of the disability community going in the wrong direction of what it actually is. You know what I mean? So it's like this. It's like a hole that can dig itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I think the more and more I think about this, the more I get excited about people not being afraid to speak their mind, which is what you guys do.
Yeah. Well, we've never started the podcast to make friends. Like, I think that was also the advantage we had. We weren't super entrenched in the disabled community when we started the show. Maybe if we were, we might have been a little bit more conservative with things. But like, well, as you said, like there's some people who do have different opinions, and it's social suicide if they speak up. We never had that. It was always, well, we're not in this community. It's interesting to be in there, and we've gotten in there a little bit since the show, but we're not there to make friends. I don't care if Kathy in Liverpool hates us because we have an opinion that's cat to her. Like, you know what?
We have lives outside this podcast. Do you know what I mean? You can hate us during the bubble, but at the end of the day, we can just step away from it.
Yeah. And that's what you can't do on social media necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. And I think a lot of people on social media, I'd go as far as to say that sometimes people act like they believe it's a certain thing when they don't, just because they know it does have that check of approval on it already. So they're just like, well, that's what I publicly think.
Yeah.
And then they suppress what they actually think. And I think there's a lot of dishonesty out there. People just playing along with it.
Yeah.
And then that gives the people, that loud minority again, that gives them the wrong idea that what they're saying is actually people agree with it, because no one's actually challenging it, because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just wish that it could go both ways. I just wish that, I want everyone to be able to speak their truth. So if your truth is like, I want to call everything ableist, and I want to, talk about this, and this, and be huge, very politically driven and calling out people. And if you want to be that way, then you have to be okay with people going the opposite way. You have to be okay with there being a little bit of a push and pull. And what it seems like, it seems so lopsided.
Yeah.
I guess is my biggest takeaway. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that topic?
No, I think that's about it for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. It is lopsided, and that's why you have a show like us that sit on the other side of the seesaw to try and weigh that side down a little bit. And hopefully with every episode that goes out, we can weigh that other side down just a little bit more, make it a bit more balanced.
Yeah, I love that, actually. And, and if you're listening and you're like, Lance, I can't believe you're saying that, that's partially my fault, because I have avoided topics for, so it's like, get used to me talking about things that you may, wouldn't have expected me to say or talk about, because I'm trying to dive deeper and, truly be transparent, which I always talk about being. So I'm being that right now. Sorry if you don't like it. I do love all my listeners though. So, but I want to add, I have a question from a listener. It's kind of related to what we've been talking about. Yeah, I wanted to play it, and then we can talk about it and answer his question.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, go for it.
Vinny here from Life in the Passenger Seat. My question is there a certain question that you get answered about your disability that is kind of like a pet peeve? Like, for example, my wife and I had infertility issues, and I mean we have a biological daughter now after taking some time, but we're asked, are we going to have any more? And that's kind of a pet peeve, a kind of a trigger question for my wife. So is there a question that you get asked, whether it's a common question you get asked all the time, or a question that you don't maybe get asked all the time, but when it does get asked, you kind of don't want to answer it, or just a pet peeve question. Thank you.
The simplest one for me is, if you're blind, how can you read that? It's just like, because obviously you listeners and viewers will know that disability generally is a spectrum, and so is blindness and visual impairment. So I might be able to walk down the same street during the daylight without a cane, and then at night I'll have to use one. And it's the same with, reading something. I might have to use a cane, and then I can sit down on a train and use my phone. And to some people that's they just can't comprehend it. It's a sort of one or the other. You're either totally blind or you can see. There's no in between. So you do get that sometimes. If you're blind, how can you read that? Or just, you know, if you're blind, how can you see that? Or it's like, even my dad asked like something the other day because my granddad's going blind, and he was playing cricket with one of his grandkids, and he's like, he's going blind. How can he catch that ball? I'm like, Dad, you've got a son of like 30 years plus, and you're asking this question now.
Yeah. I'm a guide dog user or seeing eye dog in the States. So the amount of ridiculous questions that you get are like, there's so many of them. The one I get asked the most is, "Oh, are you training them?" No, they're my dog. And then they'll turn and say, "Oh, you don't look blind." It's like, what's a blind person look like? Have I got to fall off of the train platform or something? What have I got to do to convince you? Like, who are you? And the other one, yeah, I'm rambling now, but the other one I get is, what's your sight condition? How much can you see? And I'm like, that.
I don't really have a problem with that as a question.
I get that.
Because people are just curious.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I don't mind saying, like, I don't mind answering that, but I know some people who really don't like being asked. And going back to what we spoke about on this episode, like on Twitter, some people say, "Oh, someone asked me what my condition is," and then I turned to them and said, "Well, I don't ask you how big your penis is." It's like, no, it's not even the same thing. Come on. And it's like, this is why society doesn't think that disabled people are interesting or fun.
Yeah, I feel like there's these questions I hear all the time about that. Like you don't look blind. But it's like, since I'm not legally blind, I can obviously see quite a bit. If I tell people about it, it's like they think that I'm. They scratch their heads because they're like, "All right, you have a podcast about it." And they're like, "But you can see a certain degree, so why are you identifying as someone who's visually impaired? Why are you putting yourself in that category? And it can even be like a mind fuck with me. Like, it's like, sometimes I'm like, should I have a podcast about this? It's, I'm not even legally blind. Like, should I even be a voice of this community? But it's like, my perspective is like from someone, in the process of losing their vision. And I think I think it's a cool perspective. And not one that I hear that often. So mine's coming at it from like a curiosity standpoint, is kind of like, what's my future going to be? So I guess my questions would always just be like, my pet peeve would just be like, not even a question I've been asked, but mainly just like an attitude I've received of just kind of confusion around, my intentions of, being an advocate, having this podcast and like talking about the stuff that I talk about,
No, absolutely not.
What do you guys think? What's your honest opinion? Like, do you think having my perspective is cool for like a podcast? I know it's a curveball.
Yeah, we've actually had people pick it up on ours because we're not totally blind, and it's good to get someone with a sort of visually impaired perspective. Again, with RP being a bit degenerative as well. Like, you're learning as you go, essentially. Yeah. So, I think that's a great place to be in. I mean, it's not a great place to be in, but it's a great place to be in for a podcast. Yeah.
So it's a spectrum. We all have different perspectives. Yeah. And that's all based on experience and our sight levels and or respective disabilities, and like, everyone's opinion is valid. Like, if you have some form of, if your sight in any situation isn't what it should be, like, and you've got a condition, like, you're part of the community, like, you can't sidestep that. It is what it is. So your opinion is as valid as anyone else. Like, 100%, and you should have the right to voice your opinion, because it's a different perspective, and that's what people need. You need as many perspectives as you can, because you can't be informed if you don't know it.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of tying it into all what we talked about today, it's like there are people in the disability community who would probably think that I shouldn't have a voice in it. And then there's people not in the disability community who think I probably shouldn't have a voice in it. So it comes from both sides, There's purists on both sides of the spectrum,
Everyone's entitled to an opinion at the end of the day. Opinions ultimately are useless, because everyone has an opinion and it can change at the drop of a hat. So just let people have their opinions. If that's how they feel, fine. You don't have to feel obligated to convince them otherwise. I think one of the biggest issues that people have is not willing to change their opinion, making it a part of their identity. And that's something that everyone's got to be prepared to do. Like, be prepared to be convinced otherwise. And that's where a lot of the issues come from. Like, if people don't want to change their opinion, then leave them to it. Like, not worth your hassle, really.
I think as well, if you're new to the space, if you've recently got or inherited a disability, depending on how it's come about to you, just to, if you want to start becoming part of the community, just to look around, get loads of different perspectives on it before you make that decision, before you take your stand, and like T said, be open, even once you've made your decision, that potentially other things may sway you back and forth. Don't just set up shop and
and I like to I like that advice. Kind of don't just follow people who you agree with everything they say. It's nice to have like, I follow people who I disagree with completely, because I like to have the knowledge of what their perspective is. You know what I mean? Well, cool. And I want to give a thanks to Vinny for sending in that question. If you want to ask a question and be featured in an episode, just DM me a video of a question, and that can be you on the next episode. So thanks, Vinny. But I really appreciate you guys. I look forward to hearing more from you. And hearing more episodes, and I'm glad you guys are bringing balance to the force, that is the disability world.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us on anytime, and we'll get you on Seesaw. Coming up, if you want to really cut loose. Anything goes.
Yeah, let's cut loose, man. That's it for this episode, and
cheers.
All the best, man.
Look forward to staying in touch, guys. Take it easy.